Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. I hope you all have your energy levels turned up to 10 because I am so excited for this episode that my energy levels are probably at like 11 right now. So I'm so excited for this episode because we have a lot planned. And so we're going to be doing a continuation of our indoor gardening series. But the big but to that is that we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff that you can take out into the garden in the spring and actually apply outdoors as well. So even if you're not growing indoors, stay tuned, pay attention. You're going to learn so much, and there really will be some stuff that you can take out in the garden and actually benefit from, I promise. We're going to be answering some questions in regards to the lights in the bed. There's some more additional questions that I want to get answered very quickly. We're going to show you all the results that we're getting so far, even after 1 week, which is just outstanding. If I don't say so myself, they are looking incredible. I'm really pleased with the results so far. And then we're also going to talk about the main reason why I'm filming this episode, which is to talk about the 3 things that every plant needs to grow and to actually grow well in a high-intensity approach gardening method. Because one of the biggest things that I saw in the comments section was, Luke, you are planting way too many seeds. And I thought to myself, they must have not seen the video that I did last spring about how you can grow 500% more vegetables in 5 times less space. That's not a hoax, it's not clickbait, and it's definitely not a gimmick. It's really true, and there is definitely a method to my madness, which I want to outline those 3 things because it's the same 3 things that every plant needs to survive. And when you do it correctly, you too can grow so much more than you ever thought was possible. We've seen the benefits from this method, and I can't tell you how many people have switched. They always say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I don't believe it at all, because once people have seen that episode and they really understood, aha, I understand what he's talking about, they too use that method. And even you might have switched already, which I'm so happy for you if you did, because you're already understanding why I'm so passionate about this method. But if you're someone that's not yet switched over, even if you're an old dog, you could still be taught new tricks as well. The method is so easy to implement and the results are so incredible. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to be talking about the 3 things that every plant needs, and if you do it correctly, you too can have a high intensity garden. The first thing is soil fertility. You must, and this is a must, be growing in fertile soil. Plants will compete for nutrients and soil space. This is inevitable. But if you have fertile soil with lots of nutrients, lots of organic matter, and very well-draining, absorbent, and aerated soil, you'll find that there's really no need for the plants to compete for nutrients because there's enough to go around. In an environment where there's not enough nutrients, there will be competition. Anytime you have competition, you'll have a winner. And that winner will usually grow larger and grow faster and then smother out the rest of the plants. Which is why most people believe that you can't grow this much in a given space, because they've seen just how fast something will get smothered out, and then it's a waste of time, it's a waste of seed, and it really just slows down the other plants. Whereas in this method, everything grows uniformly because they're all pulling from the same nutrient source, the same water source, which we'll talk about, and they're all growing very uniformly, so they're not competing for that sunlight, which is the second thing that I wanted to talk about. The way we've planted out this garden bed is the same way we plant out our outdoors garden bed, which is by like varieties. It's very difficult to implement this method if you're trying to grow just a plant everywhere in 12 different plants all in one little space. It definitely is not a great approach because you want to keep the same size plants all the same, and that is really easy to do if you're planting like varieties. So in this space here, we planted all lettuce and salad greens. In the back, we planted some tomatoes and some cucumbers here, radishes in the back, and basil. And you'll find that my method for doing that is that the plants, when they're growing, will all grow, if in their given areas, they'll all grow at a very consistent rate, meaning they won't smother each other out, the leaves won't cover each other up, and so they don't have to compete for that sunlight. Everything will have access to growable light, meaning that there's no competition for sunlight, and therefore everything can survive. And the third thing that every plant needs is access to water. Now in this bed here, I'll also answer a question that people ask all the time is, does this bed have drainage? The answer is no, because we need lots of moisture to ensure that there's no competition for soil moisture. Now remember, there's a very fine print here that you must make sure you're not overwatering. And the way you do that is by paying attention to your plants and looking for signs in the soil that your soil is adequately moist. We don't have any drainage holes in the bottom because we want there to be a little bit of excess moisture able to be down at the very bottom that plants can draw from and can wick up into the soil to create even soil moisture. That's why in the indoor garden we don't have drainage holes. Outdoors, obviously it will drain freely. So because we want adequate water and even watering all throughout the bed, what we have done is we've also implemented a method called the core gardening method. Now this is a method that I have combined with high intensity gardening to truly be one of the best all-around methods I've ever found for gardening. You bury a bunch of organic matter in the soil and it actually fills up with water throughout the season, and anytime it rains, it recharges that core of organic material, allowing the plants to have access to water without having to compete for water. And then what that does is it allows for the root systems to all be very uniform rather than one plant having a large root system growing out and kind of entangling the rest and competing for that root system space and not allowing the other plants to have access to water. The roots all go straight down into the soil rather than spreading out. And that's because the water source is below rather than letting the soil dry out and having the roots say, I have no clue where to go. If the soil's always moist, the roots will always go down and they don't have to look as far for that water. And so you can implement that method as well. I'll post a link to the core gardening method below. But those are the three things. So if you plant like varieties with a proper watering regimen and good soil, so they don't have to compete for water, and you also have a really good, fertile, rich, nutrient-dense soil, so they don't have to compete for nutrients, you too can grow high intensity. And everyone that is having bad results, everyone that's not happy with the results, look at those three and see if you're really doing them well, because I've found in my experience that when I achieve those three things and I make sure that those three things are consistent, there's never been a time when I have been disappointed. I promise you, it's been absolutely incredible, as you'll see here. So those are the three. I really hope you take those and I hope you share them with your friends. And I really do hope that you've learned something from this episode, because that was the meat of why I was filming this episode. So now let's get into talking about the lights. I got a quick question to answer there. And we've also answered the question about the drainage. So no drainage holes on the bed. And the way we make sure not to overwater, like I said, is just to make sure you look at soil cues. If they're starting to dry out around the edges, but the center is still nice and dark, don't water. You want to make sure that the top of the soil is beginning to turn uniformly brown. Just because there's dry around the edges does not mean your soil needs water. That's a big misconception and a big reason why people often overwater, because they think, my soil is dry, and they water here. The problem is the edges always dry out first and the center always dries out last. So, but what you don't understand is underneath the soil, what you need to understand is that when it's in the center here, it's obviously more moist. And that moisture will wick outwards underneath the soil. Just because the top and around the corner is dry does not mean underneath the soil is dry as well. It will actually wick that out, much like the core gardening method does, and it will create even soil moisture. So once you see the center starting to turn light brown and the edges light brown, you know that then it's time to re-water. And that gives you that consistent moisture. Also, if you're watering and your plants are starting to turn limp or wilt, and you know you're probably watering too much. They don't have snorkels, and they really do need a really well-draining soil that's free of sopping wet water so that they can breathe and not rot. And so by having a nice drying out period, you're also not going to be causing rot, which is another sign that you're overwatering. And then the final way that we tell that the plants are adequately watered is by also looking at their color. You'll notice that when you overwater, the leaves will tend to turn yellow. That's because the plants have a hard time accessing nutrients. And you'll find that during a heavy rain or something like that, your plants will start to turn yellow because a lot of the nutrients have been washed right away from the root system because it's just been saturated with water. And because many nutrients are water soluble, they go too far down in the bed or too far down in your soil, and the plants can't access that nutrients. I can't film with the lights on, it gets too bright and it looks too washed out. So the question about the lights is, how often do you have them on versus how often do you have them off? These lights here are very potent, they're very powerful, they put out a lot of growable light. I only have them on for about 12 to 13 hours, and the rest of the day is off. So about 12 hours on, 12 hours off. Some days I'll give them a little bit more than 12 hours because I really like to ensure they're getting a lot of light so they grow really well. But if you're growing with something like a shop light, again, those work. They just don't give off as much growable light. So you want to make sure you keep those on for about 18 hours and 6 hours off. Your plants do need a rest period. It's very important that your plants get a period of darkness so that they can go through a cycle. Just like you need a sleep cycle, the plants also are not, they're not able to grow in just 24 hours of light. They need a sleep cycle as well. Everything here is doing amazing. I'm going to walk you through, look at them really quick. But as you can tell, they're not stressed at all. And how you can tell is because they are sturdy, they're not falling over, and they're not stretching for the light. Check out how stocky the lettuce is. Look at how beautiful that lettuce is. Look at how closely they're planted together. See how one's not growing taller than the other. They're all growing very uniformly, and they'll continue to grow very uniformly because they're all lettuce greens. Here we have the red vein sorrel just starting to germinate. You can see the basil is doing really well. And there's a lot of the basil. Here's some radishes starting to sprout there. Cucumbers are starting to sprout. I'll probably prune out one, maybe two. We just don't have a lot of growable space here for the cucumbers. Even though they're a dwarf and they'll probably only get about this large when they're fully mature, I want to make sure that they do have enough space to sprawl out. The cilantro is germinating really nicely. The parsley is growing up great. We also have some onions beginning to germinate there. You can see those onions looking really nice. The carrots are up and they're growing already, which is just fantastic. These are the tiny tom tomatoes. These are the truly dwarf tiny tom tomatoes we have lots of those growing. And finally, we have the tom thumb peas. 100% germination rate on the tom thumb peas. So those are growing really great, and definitely can't wait to see those growing up a little trellis that I'm going to make so they can stay up tall there. So there you go, there's an overview of the garden. Hopefully I've answered all your questions about the lights in the grow bed. If you do have any more, post them in the comments box below. And also, I hope you all learned something about the 3 essential things that every plant needs that can allow you to grow high intensity with great results. I do hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. Stay tuned. We got so much more amazing stuff coming at you. And I do hope that you'll share this with your friends and subscribe if you've not yet already. Give this video a huge thumbs up. That helps out immensely. And we'll catch you all later on the next episode. This is Luke from the MIgardener channel. We'll catch you all later. See ya. Bye.